The Princess Bride, Chapter 1. Nicola lived in a cabin in the woods. Her favorite pastimes were whispering to the chickens and cleaning toilets. Nothing gave Nicola more pleasure than ordering her husband around.
Husband, go collect me the chicken eggs.
As you wish.
Husband, go pick up the dog poop.
As you wish.
Husband, get me the rum.
As you wish.
Aww.
All right. We keep doing this.
Woo!
It's so fun. And, we're huge in Europe.
We do have
we have a person.
That's like in Italy, I think.
But, our numbers are so big. So if we have 2% in Europe, then, those
it's huge.
Extrapolate out.
Huge.
But we've got another good one for you today. I'm the redhead therapy guy with the mustache.
And I'm a Mike.
We're here to do this great podcast today. Today, I'm excited. We're talking about The Princess Bride.
Yes.
This is a beloved movie.
Inconceivable.
Yeah,
we're excited. It's a fun one. There's a lot going on.
Forgive me if I'm going to try not to cough in the microphone, but I'm battling getting over a cold, so.
We'll try.
So this is like a beloved show of many. It's interesting. It wasn't beloved of me. I'm gonna be a little pointed in some of my feedback today. I mean, it's a great, fun movie, but I'm definitely gonna poke a little bit at the show, I think, today in this one. But because there were some things that irritated me, but I still love it though. You know what I mean? I love the story, and it's hilarious. And I think one of the things that's so funny about it is it's like such a farce.
Yeah.
Everything is so over the top.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Which is one of the things that's, fantastic and great about it. But.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun things. I don't think I have a lot of friends who could paraphrase or recite.
I know.
Tons of lines.
I didn't watch it that many times.
Yeah, I didn't watch it too much growing up. I mean, I've watched it more than just once or twice. I mean, I watched it growing up, but not a ton. But for me, every time I watch it, and I see Wesley, Men in Tights comes into my head. It's impossible for me to not think of the song. We're Men in Tights, tights. Every time I see Wesley, it's just.
I don't know if I've even ever fully watched that.
Oh man, that one's a good one. That's a fun one. Maybe we'll do that.
Does that have one of the three brothers? Who is it? One of the brothers in it.
One of the brothers. It has Wesley in it. I don't know the actor's name. What is his name?
Oh,
I can't think of his name, but he's Robin Hood.
Right.
And
Carrie Elwes.
Yeah, and he's also in. Isn't he in the Scary Movie too? That one. Oh, there's a Saw. I think he's in Saw.
Oh, really? I didn't see it.
But yeah, he's Robin Hood.
I'm thinking of the guy that's got it's like Martin Sheen or isn't
there's other people in it. I can't remember. I haven't seen it in a while. I just remember the song.
So, that's not the movie we're doing today. So
no, it's not.
So one of the things when I watched this again, one of the things that struck me and took me back was seeing What's His Bucket from Wonder Years.
Oh, Fred Savage.
Thank you, Fred. Because I loved
Wonder Years.
The Wonder Years, dude. Yeah. That was one of my go-to shows. And I think one of the reasons why this movie wasn't necessarily a beloved movie of mine growing up is because I identified with is this a kissing movie or a kissing book, he says. Because I think I was Princess Bride, isn't that kind of like a girly thing or whatever? You know what I mean? So I think I totally identified with that part. The other thing too about that scene, so I loved Fred Savage. I was a huge Wonder Years fan. And then Columbo.
Yeah.
I loved the show Columbo. My mom and I used to watch that one, and Angela Lansbury. What was the one that
Murder, She Wrote.
Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah, those are both good.
And so those were two like crime-ish shows, like innocent 80s crime shows, not like the shows we have today. And I really loved
Yeah, we used to
Columbo.
watch them all the time too.
I loved Columbo. It was just such a great show. So right off seeing the show, I was like, it just like took me back because I remember those two characters.
So I have a couple things. One, I love just seeing what's in his room. There's all these toys from when I was a kid.
I totally thought of you when I was watching it too. I'm like, there's He-Man.
And so, yeah, I loved it. And so one of my favorite moments the other night when I was watching it again in preparation was my 6-year-old Felicity was watching with me, and I think Heather was there and maybe Lorelai, I can't remember, but Felicity was there for sure on the couch. And right after Wesley dies, quote unquote, and it pops back to Fred Savage.
He's just mostly dead.
Yeah, he's mostly dead. So right after he's mostly dead, he pops back to Fred Savage, and my daughter Felicity, she shoots up off the couch, and she like stands up. I mean, she's tiny, so it's easy for her to just go from sitting to standing. And so she stands up, and she's like, "He-Man." And like right behind him is an old 80s He-Man.
Yeah, awesome.
And I just thought that was
Well, it was
awesome.
like just messy with toys everywhere.
Yeah, it was so
I was
cool.
trying to, the one scene I was like trying to look and see what else I could see that like reminded me of my childhood. I should have paused it and like looked.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a couple of Motu figures. There was a couple of, what was the other thing? I'm trying to think. I can't remember now. There was something else that I remember, but there was a couple of Masters of the Universe figures besides He-Man that were in the background. A lot of the times they're blurred, so it's kind of hard to make some of the stuff out. But that was really fun. That was nostalgic.
It is super fun.
So the movie.
So yeah, so like I said, I was as I was watching it this time around, I was like, oh, there are some things that I want to like critique, or I was bugged by. Like I was really like bugged a little bit by the As You Wish.
Sure. So the constant. So in the beginning, right? In the beginning, that's it, right? It's as
Well, it's
you
because
wish,
it's just
as you-
well,
it's
it's
the only words he says.
well, it's because it's like the total fantasy of like a guy that will like take a beating, will like, like she's kind of like dust my shoes or like fetch the water. It's like, as you wish, and it's just like. It's like, how can I compete with that? Like, I'm not blonde
So
and
it's
handsome.
the fantasizing
Like,
of
I can't-
what true love
Right,
which is just bending over backwards and doing
do
whatever
everything.
the person wants.
But but then also though, and I don't know if my wife would agree with this, but like I really actually do try to deliver on like what my wife wants. I mean, I do.
Sure.
I don't know if it's as you wish. So there was a part of me that was just like, oh, this is so unrealistic. But it's a comedy. It's a love story. It's a farce. It's over the top for sure. I mean, that's what's fantastic about it. It's like silly over the top, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the real shtick of the movie.
And that's, I mean, really magnified when they're like fighting or something, and she pushes them over the ledge. And what does she say? She says something like, die.
Yeah, like die, or like because like you killed him or something like that.
Yeah, and what is his response?
As you
Yeah. That's over the top, right?
And then she jumps down the hill as well. That was like the first one. I remember loving that part as a kid, being like, "That's fantastic." She's like rolling down. I was impressed by the stunt work this time watching it. As an adult. I was like, that's some impressive stunt work.
Yeah, back then there's no computer graphics, right? No CG.
No, they were just like
all
bouncing
real.
all over each other. So that really struck me in the opening scene was, this kind of, but it's interesting though, because I think, when we fall in love, we're putting our best foot forward.
Yeah, there's that honeymoon period.
Yeah, like we're putting our best foot
as you
forward.
wish,
Yeah,
really.
that's like we'll do whatever the other person wants, and we love it, and they get us, and they understand me, and it's love like I've never loved before, and nobody would ever love me like this person can love me, and there is like a physiological effect of falling in love, and the chemicals that affect our brain and the way that we perceive the relationship, and it really feels like that,
Well, and it's interesting because how often do you have a couple come in and they're the issue is it's not what it was.
Right.
I want it to be what it was, and helping them to understand.
That's a very specific part. And I think it's like what gets us into like long-term monogamous relationships is that idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, and I remember being in, I I can't remember if it was graduate school or undergrad. I remember having a class where they showed a graph of these physiological effects in the brain with love, and they talked about the falling in love phase, and I don't know which chemicals of the brain it was. There's a huge bump, that exists in the falling in love phase, and I forget if it was like a 6 month or a year and a half kind of arc, right? And it would drop off, and then it would drop way down. And then there's this other effect that happens over time as you love, as you sacrifice, as you work, that goes up over time. And over time, if the peak of the love bump drops off over love time, bump. Love bump. Well said. Over the bump, you hit the trough and then you go back over. But when you go over time, the chemicals that get released are a different chemical in the brain. It's not as intense as the falling in love drug of the brain, but it is more salient.
True love.
Right.
Starts to come
there you go.
Play, right?
It becomes something akin. And the thing I remember the professor talking about was that's the chemical that they associate with the attachment of a baby to a mom.
So like oxytocin.
Yeah, right. And so there's the one release in the falling in love phase, and then as you commit and stay over time, you hit this trough, but then it gradually grows. But the thing that she was trying to make the point of is like if you hang in there, the bump that you get from if you say it's oxytocin over time, like just trumps the falling in love drug.
Yeah,
it's so much more. Yeah, and it was really fascinating to kind of see that, and it kind of clicked for me. And because I know like my wife and I had really tough years in our marriage. I want to say like 4 to 7 were really tough. But like as we've gotten through that, like.
Yeah.
I mean, the love and attachment.
Well, and it's this idea of resilience being built, right?
Yeah.
And when you can do that with someone and experience someone and grow stronger together, that seems like a stronger bond than even just doing it on your own.
Yeah.
But you have to get through it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And sometimes
it's a legit trough.
Is years, like you said, years 4 to 7. Sometimes it's a long haul.
It was.
And for some, if we're being honest, some it doesn't change, right? Because it takes both parties to be vested.
Right.
And sometimes one of the individuals is just not able to, for whatever reason. There's lots of reasons.
Well, there's tons of reasons that affect it.
Yeah,
healthy
sometimes
attachment.
It can't move through. And so it's interesting because you have couples that will come in and they'll be like, hey, I feel like this is not the person I married. Right. They're a different person. My wife, of course, I'm just awesome. So she doesn't ever have that complaint. I'm exactly.
I can't imagine.
You're
exactly the same as when you guys got married.
And so
you haven't matured one bit.
I think that's one of these things, though, that's kind of this like media lie. I don't know that that's the right term.
No, I think it is. I think it absolutely is. The way that love is articulated and described in the movies, it's always the falling in love.
And it's such a rude awakening for when there's usually like a moment, right? Whether that be marriage or whether that be moving in together or whether that be just a certain time period that you've been together. There's a point at which, things start to maybe adjust or change where that honeymoon period is gone.
It's interesting too. So maybe that's really one of the things that the movie is really articulating is that process, right? They were like falling in love, and maybe if you think about it symbolically, like he didn't literally leave, but she felt distant from him. And he became something else. He became the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah.
He became a villain in the marriage, in the story. She felt it, and she felt because she's marrying Prince Butthead for
Buttercup. Is it? No. What is her? She's Buttercup.
She's Princess Buttercup.
What is his name?
Oh, hold on. I can look it up. I pulled the IMDb up so we wouldn't flub everything.
Yeah, we're good
so
at that.
Prince Humperdinck.
Oh, Humperdinck. That's right.
He looks totally different now, man. His current picture, he doesn't look anything like he used to look. Humperdinck. It's fantastic. It's so fantastic. Princess Buttercup.
Yeah, it is
Humperdinck.
awesome.
So. So that's really interesting because she's marrying him, I guess, out of is it out of duty or like because she's a peasant? I wasn't
really clear on that because it was, I don't know if it's to like kind of to bring, so he has this motive, right?
Yeah.
And so
he doesn't love her. She's a tool.
No, and I think the whole thing is she's just a sacrifice to create a war, right?
Right, yeah.
And because I think
Which
his
is
goal is to
interesting.
overtake more. He wants power, right? So
Right.
I think that's the whole thing behind that.
So then does that mean that the guy that says inconceivable was hired by him?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
that's my understanding.
Yeah, okay. That's
yeah,
funny.
yeah. He
That
was
I'm just
hired
now,
by
like,
him to
I'm
help
just now
with
figuring
the
it out.
Murder. Yeah. And so, and that's a whole nother relationship
Storyline.
dichotomy that's really interesting to me.
But no, let's stay with that for a minute. So it's interesting. So let's say symbolically this is just symbology of them separating.
Sure.
So he becomes a villain, Sir Pirate Roberts. Is that right? Am I saying that right? The
Dread
Dread
Pirate
Pirate Roberts. And so he becomes a villain, and she's disenchanted with him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess she's upset because he killed her. She killed Wesley. He killed Wesley.
Yeah, she's upset because she thinks he
The
killed
Dread
Wesley.
Pirate Roberts killed.
Yeah,
so
she
I
thinks
wonder,
Wesley's dead,
and so that's interesting. I mean, like, after you fall in love and get going,
and
you
Wesley
know,
is dead to some
Dead.
degree because
Yeah.
it's Dread Pirate Roberts, right?
That's right. Yeah, he's taken on a
So
new
that's a
identity.
really interesting
Yeah,
thought,
isn't that?
is that it's symbolic of, or it's really
Of that time.
of marriage, right?
Right.
Or I mean, of a relationship, right?
Right.
There's usually a point in some relationship, and definitely when marriage happens, there's something about that commitment. But there's other commitments outside of marriage that people do. Not everyone gets married, where maybe they move in together,
Right.
Or there's maybe a financial obligation that they
Right.
take on together, where it becomes.
A stress.
There's a change.
Yeah, it's usually between, like, the research that I remember. I haven't looked at current research in a long time, but I remember that the divorce rates were really high from 3 to 7, like after the first kid comes, and the division of labor has to be negotiated, and then divorce rates jump 18 to 23 because kids start to launch and couples look at themselves, look at
there's a
each other,
change.
and they're like,
There's
"What?
not the norm
yeah, like,
anymore.
are we connected? Or are we just two people that raise kids together?"
Which really emphasizes the importance of the relationship, right? And putting the relationship first throughout these times when you feel so stretched and so much is going on.
So it's interesting. So if we stay with that line of metaphor, what could the Dread Pirate Roberts having to face Mandy Patinkin and Andre the Giant and the man that says he's more brilliant than the 3 greatest philosophers that have ever lived?
Inconceivable.
Are you familiar with? He lists off 3 philosophers. He's like, they're idiots. They're stupid. There's actually
and then
a
he
shirt.
drinks the poison. He doesn't. He's not smart enough to think maybe they're both poisoned.
The thing that's so funny too is like one of the shirts that I almost got had like the 3 philosophers and then him, and it had like a line through all 3 that said idiots. And then it had, but I couldn't
That's
get it in
awesome.
time for.
Oh, is that
Escape
the one you were
today.
talking about the other day?
Yeah, it was one of there was 2 that I really liked, but I couldn't.
So
get
John's
here.
shirt says inconceivable,
Inconceivable.
and it's an adjective, and then it has a definition: not capable of being imagined or grasped mentally. And then 2, or alternate definition: not what you think it means.
That's inconceivable. Inconceivable.
Because at one point, is it Andre the Giant's character who says, "I don't think you understand what that means."
Or no, or he says, I don't. Oh, yeah, who says that? Because that's a line my wife and I say all the time to each other. I don't think that means what you think it means.
Yeah, I don't think that means what you think.
Yeah, who
which is
said that?
awesome because
We
you
say that
have
to each
these
other all the
2
time.
guys that are supposed to be
Bad
not
guys.
intelligent, right?
Right.
Compared to this genius, and they're sitting there like constantly like.
I don't think that means what you
I don't
think
think that's what that means, and then I don't think that's right. Their character is just. But we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah,
let's
that's
go back. You were
hilarious.
saying something.
Yeah,
though.
no, I think it's an interesting question to consider. So let's pretend symbolically Wesley has become a distant foreign foe in the relationship. And he's reconnecting with her, right? Because they reconnect after he defeats the 3 personalities.
Okay.
So I wonder if that's symbolic of a journey. And I've been a jerk in my marriage for sure, and I had to change. And so I wonder if there's some kind of symbolism to the 3 contentions that he goes through
So that
to
could
become
be-
a better husband,
Yeah.
or a better person in the relationship. Where then they negotiate, right? Because they're fighting when he
technically there's 4, I guess, right? Because he
well, that's
leaves.
after though, but.
right? He leaves her, which is a really interesting thought to me because
he leaves to go. Does he leave? Why does he leave? Did they say why he leaves?
I think he just
Oh,
leaves
is it-
to be like he. I think he feels inadequate. I think he feels like he's not worth her, and he needs to go and make a name for himself and earn money.
I think that's
so
the
he
idea.
can
So they
come
could
back.
buy the farm
Yeah.
or have resources. So he had to leave to make those resources, which really is symbolic of the marriage journey, right? Because if a husband in a relationship is the breadwinner, which that's not always the case, if the husband's the breadwinner, to be successful, you have to be away. You know what I mean?
Well,
you can't
and
be
I think-
successful at a job if you don't work 70 hours a week,
Well,
right?
I think what's really interesting is, he didn't feel enough for her to begin with,
Right.
which then started this journey. And I wonder if that
that's a good
has
point.
something to do with how there's these changes within relationships oftentimes where we have these external changes, right? Where maybe there's a child born, there's a marriage, there's a living arrangement, a financial obligation. But then I wonder if that maybe impacts us. I know when when we had our first child, I felt completely inadequate.
Oh my goodness, dude.
And felt a lot of times I would get frustrated, especially late nights, right? Or times. I mean, Heather did most of the work. I tried, but there's certain things I couldn't do, right? Especially with breastfeeding. So I would get up and I'd be like half awake. Heather would be talking to me. I'd be like, oh.
Nick would elbow me and hand the baby, and I would change Emmanuel. And then I had a talent to get him to fall back asleep.
That's awesome.
So I would wrap him up really tight.
Yeah.
Because he's like me. Like even now he has like 2 weighted blankets.
Yeah.
And like you put him under those weighted blankets and he's like in heaven. And I wonder if that takes back to when he was an infant, because he'd get colic bad, you know what I mean? Because the intestine was still developing. And so I would wrap him up tight and hold him tight and bounce him in this kind of pattern.
Yeah, I feel like both
and
our
he would
girls
fall.
were that way.
Yeah, he would fall off. And so that was the responsibility that I had. But so this is really interesting. My mind's really going in a cool direction.
So let me ask you
I'm sorry.
this. I going back to what you're talking about. So, we have the 3 guys that maybe symbolize 3
Yeah,
things
so
he
let's
had to
what-
overcome. But I
let's-
think maybe there is 4. I think the first is trying to overcome and learn that he is enough, because in the end he comes back, and what's the last thing he says to Montoya? I can't remember what his first name is, the one trying to avenge. He says, hey, I think you'd make a great pirate.
Yeah.
And he's saying, you know what, I don't need that, I am enough
Yes,
for
he
her.
can surrender
Yeah.
being the bad guy or the guy that has to, right? Because it's really interesting to think about that, because you could call CEOs and white collar guys, robber barons that are going out and pillaging to make money, for folks back home. That's such a cool thing to stumble upon, which maybe other people have that already figured out, and we're just late to the game.
Yeah, I'm a
so
little
let's
slow, so
look
it's
at
okay.
the 3 contentions that he goes through then, and see if that relates to our identity of development as men in marriages, because we're both into marriages pretty far. So the first one is Mandy Patinkin and he's dueling off with the sword fight. Then you've got the brute force fight, and then the will of intelligence, right? Which he of course exacts them all like he's a pro. But when you listen to him tell his wife, it's interesting, right? Because when they're walking through the bog of eternal stench or whatever it is, what's the fiery,
the swampy thing, I can't remember.
with the strangely huge rats and rodents. I
Yeah,
don't remember.
I can't
How can we
remember
not
what it's
remember
called.
what the swamp? That's
It's okay.
true fans are going to hate us.
It's okay.
But this is really interesting though too, right? Because they have this fight and they tumble down, and they have to go through that journey,
Yeah.
which then of course reconnects them, right? But let's think about that. So what are the 3 things
So
that you
first-
would gain, or are characteristics that you would gain through those contentions? And do we relate to that as men?
Well, and I wonder if there's even symbolism too, right? Because you said the first was the sword fight,
Right, with Mandy Patinkin.
and so you have,
Which is literally the best part of the whole movie.
well, you have,
I loved that part of the movie, and I loved Mandy Patinkin's character. How he wants to exact justice on
Yes.
the 6-fingered man, which is kind of fun too, because they didn't even want to be enemies. He's like, I'm sorry, I have to kill you. And
yeah.
he's like,
Well, and he's helping him, right?
Right, yeah.
He's helping him, they want it fair, and so I wonder what that might symbolize. You have a sword fight between the 2 of them, which ends with no one dying.
yeah, he
Right.
just knocks him out, right?
I mean, actually, no one dies, which is a really interesting thing. If we're talking symbolism, no one dies except for the intelligent guy. Why is that? Is there? I mean, obviously, in character-wise,
Well, he's like the legitimate bad guy.
Yeah,
him, because he's in cahoots with
you would think so.
Humperdinck.
So
right?
then, I mean, why is that? Why is it that he dies? But anyways, I mean, it's interesting to think about. I think there's probably a lot of conclusions you could draw, and maybe for him in his journey. That's maybe the hardest or the most difficult one for him to overcome, and for him to really learn and grow and overcome.
Something had
that
to die.
had to be fully fulfilled.
Something had to fully
right?
die.
Whereas maybe the other two incidents. So
because he just puts on. Oh, so or I have to say this though. I totally noticed this. Okay, I wasn't one of those like WWF people.
Sure,
I mean, I knew who Andre the Giant was, but I wasn't like I liked it. But the playful like fakery of the WWF like put me off, but now I get like that was part of the fun of it, but I didn't get that as a kid.
Sure.
But I loved, and I noticed this time, and maybe other people did too, is that like after he knocks him out, he like pins him. Like, did you notice?
I didn't notice
Oh
that.
yeah, it's great. Like after he knocks him out or like puts him out, he like rolls him over and like lays on him like, I defeated you.
I didn't.
It's such a great. I'm like, that was on purpose. Like they totally did that on purpose because he like squeezes him out and he pushes him over and lays on top of him. Like
That's
victory
awesome.
is mine. Yeah, it was awesome. I'm like, that is cool. I'm like, I'm not a WWF guy, and if the WWF people haven't watched the show because they had to, because everybody loved Andre the Giant, it's like he got knocked out. He got pinned. It was so blatantly obvious, and I was like, that's a nice touch.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
you just got me with that one.
So you asked what were the three things? You asked a question and then we went off on a tangent. What was it?
Yeah, so my if we're onto something with this spontaneous like kind of looking at the symbolism of the journey that let's say Wesley or men go through in marriage, we're contending with these three things. Like what does that symbolize that we have to grow or gain or learn to be better husbands in a marriage? Well, so what could those three contentions be, or what are the progress that we as men have to go through to be better husbands? And does that inform us, right? And I love that it's like these three different domains, right? Like there's a skill of swordplay, there's brute strength, and then there's using your mind and being intelligent.
Well, I think that applies to women too.
Right.
You know, because there's definitely a skill depending.
I'm just not a woman.
Yeah, on what you have to do. I think it applies to both, but I think that what is it? So with skill, I think that. First, starting with this idea of insecurity and then going into feeling insecure and trying to develop a skill, right? Or feel like you can perform or be enough for your companion, right? For your family.
Well, it's interesting too to listen to Dread Pirate Roberts or Wesley talk about how he was captured, and there was this understanding or this promise, like, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill you. But like it never came. And then finally he was like, okay, actually what I've done is I've chosen you to be my successor. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing, right? Because definitely I've felt like life is going to destroy me. Yeah. Like that my responsibilities, I think, are going to overwhelm me, and then I'm not equal to them. You know what I mean? And so that's a really interesting idea.
So then...
And it's cool that he's talking about it, right? Because this is him being vulnerable and like being like, hey, this is what I've been through.
So then throughout this process, if we start with when he leaves maybe out of
an obligation
fear
to
that he's not enough and
or
he
wants
needs to be more.
Or he wants to provide more.
And he leaves with this.
That intention.
Then goes into an experience that stretches him and he survives.
Well, and he was taken captive. Like it really captivated him, right? Like it overpowered him. Like it beat him, right? Like Dread Pirate Roberts, like, I mean, it took him prisoner.
So you think about this. In life, we come from a place of insecurity where we feel like we're not enough. We feel like we need to maybe prove ourselves.
You definitely come to terms with that early in marriage.
Yeah. And then you go through this experience where you feel like you've lost, you've been captured, you're powerless. And he survives that.
And it becomes a learning experience.
That, becomes a resilience experience that allows him then to see, I can do it.
Right.
Which
and
I
then
think
he goes
then
forward.
Empowers him to grow through those three experiences and to be, which is a really cool thing with marriage, right? Because the person, who Heather married is, who I am now is different, and I have grown. I have learned. Of course, there's things we need to improve on, and that's always the case. But I've grown and I've learned. And if the longer she sticks it out, we've been married 17 years, the more that I become, right?
Yeah.
The
Well, it's
more
interest-
meaningful that becomes. I think that's what it was. Maybe that's for them is starts from a place of insecurity. He makes it through this really daunting time where he builds this resilience.
Right. Well, he becomes
Yeah.
Dread Pirate Roberts, right? Which he really then is imbued with the ability to beat Mandy Patinkin, to beat Andre the Giant, to beat the most brilliant mind that's ever walked the earth.
And I wonder those experiences.
Which is inconceivable.
Yeah, those it is. It is truly inconceivable. But I wonder, I think that, and I think you probably look at it a lot of different ways, but I think the idea here is that you have these trials. The interesting thing, though, for me is he did that alone, right? Instead of with her. But then later, after those three experiences,
then they
have this trial together.
Right. And she shows forth her own strength
Yeah.
in standing up. Well, she makes her own sacrifice,
which is an
right?
interesting concept. Are they saying we maybe I don't who knows what they're saying? It's cinema, right?
Right.
but I wonder if it's
Well,
this
it's about what we
idea
take away.
of in a marriage, there's two parts.
Right.
There's the growth that you do on your own and
Absolutely.
the hardships you have to take on your own,
And the things you go through
while
together.
understanding, that there's also
Well, and they went through the
a
swamp together.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because doesn't she help him when he's getting attacked by the rat?
Well,
She bang him over the head with a.
she does something.
She does. Yeah, she does. She intervenes and helps. Doesn't she hit somebody with a branch or something like that?
I think that's some point in there. You're right. It's somewhere in there.
But
I
it's
can't
interesting
remember.
too. But what's interesting too is when they're faced with Prince Humperdinck again, and they're consummating their love again. She gives her life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To save his, right? Because she knows that that Prince Humperdinck's going to kill him.
And think about that. How often do you have, or even in your own relationship, when your spouse is going through something hard, maybe they're physically present but not emotionally, and how alone
Absolutely.
do you feel?
Oh my
and that
gosh,
kind of
it's
goes
awful.
back to your point of, he's
Away.
leaving, but it's not physically in real world, right? It's not a
In the movie,
physical
right.
distance; it's an emotional distance.
Yeah.
And so he goes through these trials where he actually develops resilience, which is a really important concept because we talked earlier about there's two people in the relationship, and sometimes one just isn't able, and maybe one struggles with building that resilience, right? Getting through that trial so that they can come back together, or the other just it's too hard to be alone.
Yeah.
In that for that period of time.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting too, if we're going to stay on this line, is when Princess Buttercup and Wesley come together and they're fighting. It's really indicative of what we fight about in marriage. Because usually what I see as a therapist is two people that really love each other, really want to be loved by each other, but they're really misunderstanding what the other is saying. And the fight is really a fight about misunderstanding what's going on.
The fight, for me, in that instance, you're right. The fight that I see, the fight is not a fight. It's a fear of saying what they really feel. I feel so alone. I feel so betrayed. I feel unworthy. You left me. I think that's what she's saying.
Yeah, you left me.
I feel alone. I feel not worthy. And he's
You're
saying
dead.
the exact same thing.
Yes, he is.
He's saying,
How could
I'm
you
not
betray
enough.
me?
I tried so hard. I'm not enough.
Yeah, the minute I wasn't there,
And
you
so-
ran to another
yeah.
man.
And so it's not necessarily, for me, it's not a fight. Now, that's always what's on the surface,
Right.
is fights.
But I guess the point I'm
what's not
making-
going on,
I guess the point that I'm making, that when I see couples, that's a lot of what's happening, is they're really just not getting each other, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot, particularly with the EFT
Well-
interventions we're doing, is getting them to really hear each
Yeah.
other, to understand their shame and their insecurity, and to understand and try to provoke an opportunity or create an opportunity where they hear and attend to and listen and understand
Sure.
each other's shame and insecurity. But
And that's the same with Gottman. Really, any marriage therapy, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
trying to get the underlying. And I think that the hard thing is that it's so you can develop resilience, you can develop strength, but it's a whole nother ball game to be vulnerable about something that's scary with someone who matters
the most. I mean, because
what if they say, "Yeah, I agree." Like if I say, "I feel like I'm not enough, and I'm just a piece of trash, and that's why you left." Like, why would you stay? And the spouse is like, right?
Yeah,
that would tear you
but
apart.
I feel like in my experience as a therapist is that they're usually always wrong. That their fear, the fear that the individuals of the relationship, I mean, occasionally there's somebody that's harsh, but usually my experience with a lot of couples is the fear, the irrational fear of the one spouse, it's not so. Yeah. But you're experiencing a confirmation bias of, well, look, she's doing that, so she must not.
It's a trauma, right?
He's doing that, so he must not.
Yeah, it's a trauma, and that's why we get attachment traumas throughout life. Right. That's where that trauma comes from, and so it's a real perceived belief in their mind.
But it's just a misunderstanding. It's mislabeling other people's motivations, and basing it on your fear. And we do that so much. Like we make
with all
the
relationships we do it. But it's scarier with those that we feel like, well, you're my person.
Right. Well, and we think we know them so well, you know, and you make these assessments and judgments that like, no, that's what you mean. No, it's what you mean. And it's like, you know, that's what you experienced and that's real, but that might not be what they meant.
Well, and there's a powerful moment in that part of the movie where every time I see that, I get emotional, and I can't remember what they say to each other. And maybe it's after they fall down the hill. I can't remember. It's somewhere in that area.
They tumble to the death.
Where
I'm like, nobody's coming away with that without a broken bone.
Where they say something, and it's almost like there's definitely a connection.
Yeah, that does happen. I think at the bottom of the hill.
Is it at the bottom where there's a connection? I can't remember the words they say, but I always get emotional because in that instance, I feel the connection. I feel like, wow, they love each other. There's safety and security there.
Right. There's just misunderstanding.
And it's not what they're saying, but it's that feeling. And it's whoever, I don't know who did the movie, but whoever did it really did a good part, right? Or did a good job directing because right then I feel it. Like I feel that draw to safety.
Well, and then they go through the fiery swamp together and they're dodging, flames and helping one another and talking. And that's the cool thing is he's just like telling the story. He's like, help me understand. And that's what we really have to do in marriage. Like we have to get that reactivity, that emotional escalation out of the way, which is really hard to do.
Sure.
And really just listen like what happened and what's going on. And even if we don't like it, or we're unhappy with the choices our spouse has made, or, it is a negative part of our spouse, but just to kind of go through that journey together and help each other avoid the fiery explosions from the ground and the huge giant rodents. Isn't that like a thing? Like
huge
the
giant
rodents. Isn't that because like they have like an acronym?
Yeah, they have an acronym in it. I can't remember what they call them.
Oh, you talk and I'll.
Well, and it's interesting too. As you move forward, you have the Dread Pirate Roberts who has gone through so much, and then he's able to really dispatch three, a giant, an expert swordsman, and a guy who's supposed to be genius.
ROUSs.
RUSs, that's right.
Rodents and of unusual size.
And so he goes through
understatement.
And is able to dispatch these three pretty easily, right? He survives the original Dread Pirate Roberts, and then he gets back with her. And it's always interesting to me that now he struggles, right? It's not as he's not like he I feel like I don't know. I feel like he got captured. He struggled in the swamp.
And that really was an interesting part for me symbolically. It was a place I was going to go, that like him getting captured and her sacrificing her love so he wouldn't be killed. Mm-hmm. And then he gets put in the dungeon. I can't remember the name of the dungeon. I'll have to look it up.
In the tree.
Yeah, in the tree.
I can't remember either.
Yeah, and he's mostly dead, right? Where he's literally tortured.
Yeah,
right.
His life force sucked out of him.
Dude, that was
by
so
the prince,
brutal.
right? Because the prince knocks it up to 50.
And I was like, dude, that's rough. I was like, whoa, dude, that's intense. And it's interesting too because what are they trying to take from him?
His life force? Is that?
Well, I thought it was time because it was like, oh, I'm going to set you to a 50-year-old or something like that. Because he's like, oh, we're going to take a year. I'm going to take a year of your life force away. But he like puts it up as high as you go and then ramps it.
Yeah.
And then that like sucks all the life out of him because it's almost like time. It's like the years are being sucked from you.
Yeah.
Right. It's like
it's taking his time. I mean, it's taking his life force.
yeah.
Right.
And that's one of the things that happens in marriage, right? Like you know time, you lose time.
Sure.
You know, you're working hard and you're putting in hours and years to raise your kids and to further your career so you can provide some house and, you know, things for your family. And, you know,
I think that it's easy to lose connection in marriage because so many other things come into play. You know, as you start to move forward in marriage and in family, really in any relationship, especially if you start to have children, you have bills that start to come in. The pit of despair. That's right. The pit of despair. And so you have children that could come into play. You have bills. You have a house, maybe car payments, right? All these things. And that, I think, maybe is symbolic of that, is that it sucks your attention away.
Yeah.
And so that you have that lost time together.
Yeah.
And I think that it's tough, right? Because I think you don't notice it. I think it's a slow and steady thing until one day, you know, one or both of the couple kind of realize, wait, I feel like you're a friend. I feel like we're roommates. Like, how often have you heard that?
Oh yeah, all the time.
And it's that connection.
We're living side by side.
Yeah.
They're not sharing love.
Yeah.
They're not sharing understanding.
So
They're
is
not
that
sharing their
because
struggle.
love is gone, or is that because love has fallen kind of down and the focus has been survival?
Yeah, I think that's it, right? Like when you're in survival mode and you're trying to pay the bills and you're trying to parent well and all the other things that can happen. I mean, it's such a tough time when you've got little ones running around.
So it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
You have shelter that becomes the primary thing. And it's not that you don't have a desire, to be there, to be present, to love, to take care of yourself even, but it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shelters first. And I wonder how much of the time, what I wonder is, what do we do to be more aware of that? Because I think a lot of couples, like, I don't remember ever being told any of this, like, hey, it's probably going to get busy. Or, hey,
so
it's
this
gonna be
is
different when you're married.
the idea that I say to my couples is you have to be deliberate. Like you have to be deliberate in making the time to show affirmation and to communicate love in the way that your spouse most feels loved.
So there's a sense here, right? When you get married, you get kind of a feeling of safety, right?
Well, because that's
like,
the fantasy. That's the fantasy that irritated me at the initial part of the show. It's like, oh, this guy's going to be here and he's going to do whatever I want to do, and she's beautiful and gorgeous, and she's, you know, and she's going to be this, you know, Madonna of a figure, right? And so it's this, and I say Madonna in the classic sense, not the modern Madonna.
Nope.
And so it's like, I think that's the naiveness that we have of true love. That's the fairy tale, which of course they kind of return to.
Sure.
But that's not what marriage is. Like that's not what marriage is, and you have to be deliberate in making that time.
Yeah.
And it is despair. Like it does require all that you have to give.
Part of that also, yes, I agree. And I think part of that is that I think you get a sense of safety, comfort, complacency in a marriage to where, I know for me, like growing up, I was always like fearful that I wasn't enough or that I wasn't wanted or desired. And then I met Heather and she cared so much. And then it gets to a point where it's like that kind of becomes safe. It's like, well, Heather's not going to go anywhere. And I think some of that, you know, leads into this me forgetting to do things that we used to do together, or having that desire, or not desire, but the motivation to do things.
Well, it's like I guess it can seem like an end where it's the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, this person has everything. It's like, no, dude, you're just starting.
Yep.
And you actually haven't hit the hard parts yet. Like not even, like you're just getting into the relationship.
Well, I think that, you know, oftentimes it's hard to keep putting in that work because, you know, one, there's a sense of safety, two, there's a lot of things going on, right? Dude. And then three, on top of all of that, maybe behaviors start to change too a little bit, right? There's different stresses that cause different reactions.
Right, or you're not trying as hard, or you can't hide anymore. I mean, gosh, man, when we were like so Emmanuel was born 11 months or 10 months into our marriage, and oh my gosh, dude, we were so freaking poor. I was working a night shift. I would come home, I would sleep for an hour, and then I'd go to school all day.
Yeah.
And Nick was just about to have Emmanuel. And so she didn't like get a job or anything when we got to Rexburg, because we got there like 2 months before he was born. And like we had like no money.
Yeah.
And then I had like another part-time job after class, like 3 or 4 days a week, like down in freaking Blackfoot.
Yeah.
From Rexburg that I would drive to. And oh my gosh, it was so hard. I remember being a month into that schedule, and I worked 4 nights a week. And I remember it was like 2:00 in the morning or something, and I could do my schoolwork, you know, but like I had to stay up.
So is that?
And I just remember like one of these moments being like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like it was like, yeah, the Dread Pirate Riders like took me like captive. It's like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And then I said to myself, I remember saying this to myself. I said, well, it doesn't matter if you think you can. You have to. I'm like, you have to do this. And so it really affected me. It was like, okay. It was like, well, you know, and we're faithful people. I was like, okay, well, God's going to have to bless me because this is what I have to do. And I'm barely paying the bills as it is now. I mean, we're just like ridiculously poor, eating like, you know, macaroni and cheese and Hot Pockets or something. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, this is just what I have to do. So, all right. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's, yeah, it's hard. Like how, like I'm sure I wasn't very emotionally available to my wife during that time.
That's what I wonder, right? Is there's times, and I even think back at graduate school, it's just, it's a time suck, right? And I had to work also. I don't know how people, I mean, I guess you could take on a ton of loans, but honestly.
Well, I did.
It's
graduate
tough.
school, I had a ton of loans.
But yeah, I had to work. And it was, you know, it's not uncommon. I remember I'd be at school, and I worked at school too. So I'd be at school 16 hours, 18. Yeah. I mean, and then.
Yeah, how can you work on your marriage? You're just going 16 hours.
And it makes me think about that, right? That's kind of that moment when, you know, I'm not even present to be there. And I wonder how difficult that is for Heather. And just having conversations like that sometimes is enough. You know, just recognizing the hardship and talking about it and being there with each other in it. I don't know that I ever, because
it's not like one person
about it, though.
I think we did. I feel like we did. We were really, I think one of the things that Nick and I did well is that we were really deliberate about like talking about each other, because you know Nicola, my wife, wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. She's a dental hygienist, and she worked a lot. That was one of the other things that was really interesting and difficult, which was really great for our marriage. So like during the summers, she could work full-time. So she worked 2 jobs part-time as a dental hygienist, but it worked out to full-time hours.
That's cool.
And so during the summers, we had 2 kids at that time in Logan. And so I was stay-at-home dad for the summers, and she worked. And then we fought bad during the transition periods. Yeah. So when the division of labor got upset by the change of roles. So then I was going back to school full time. She had to surrender working, and she was coming back to stay at home. But the thing that was really good for our marriage is that we really fully, I think, got to experience what it's like to be home all day with the kids, and what it's like to be gone all day at work, and what you experience and what you need from each other. So those were really difficult times, particularly during the transitions. But I think we gained a lot of perspective, because I really was like, my wife was like, yeah, I don't want to go to work. I want to be home with the kids. And I was like, yeah, I can appreciate what it's like to be home with the kids. And I definitely wanted to be the breadwinner.
I could definitely see how in those transitions, it would cause frustration. It would cause irritability. It would cause poking to happen.
Yeah, because we probably didn't communicate well about it.
Not actually mad. Not because you're actually upset. But I could see for her this immense feeling of, I should be home taking care of my kiddos, this immense feeling of guilt or shame, I'm assuming here, or even for you,
I don't know,
this immense feeling of guilt or shame of, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. While you understand, I'm contributing. Right. I'm doing what I need to be doing.
Well, I think,
but then you feel this, and I feel this too. I feel it when like I leave for work and I'm not at home. I'm working. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
But you're not there.
But I'm not there.
Yeah, it can't help.
I feel shame. I feel guilt. I'll have more irritability, and it's not because I'm mad.
Yeah,
it's because I'm feeling inadequate in what I'm doing.
And that's such a great thing, because there's not enough. Which is, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about marriage, especially if you get to a place where you complement each other because there isn't enough to go around.
No.
I mean, there isn't enough of you to go around. You can't do everything. I mean, that's one of the lies I think that exists in modern society about that, like, you can do it all and have it all. It's like,
Well, and how
no,
often-
you can't. No, you can't. You cannot do it all and have it all. Because every time you choose something, you're not choosing something else. You have to give things your attention. And if you're giving your career 80%, and this isn't like you can do it all whatever you want. There's no judgment for me about what it's just like if you make the choice to be awesome at your career, that's going to take you 70 to 80 hours a week. And if you're doing that 70 to 80 hours of the week, you're not doing something else. Like you're not being attentive to your spouse. You're not being there. And there's choices to be made.
And there's plenty of times where, Heather will struggle to like take time to go and exercise or to do something for herself because she feels like she should be spending her time in whatever her responsibilities are, right?
Moms are just so overwhelmed by that.
I will feel, I'll have something happen at work and everything's fine at work. There's, no issue, but I perceive it as an issue. I perceive it as I did something wrong or I perceive it as I fell short. And then what happens? I get irritable at home.
Right.
Not because Heather's done anything wrong, not because the girls have done anything wrong, but because I perceive that I was inadequate, I was bad.
We do that
and
all the time.
instead of sharing that pain, because it's scary to say, I feel like I'm a horrible worker, I feel like I'm not measuring up at work. It's scary for my partner to think I'm inadequate.
Right.
So I don't share that. I get upset. And I can see how for you guys in those transitions, it probably wasn't about anger. It's probably about what is the real issue. Communicate.
Yeah, it was about the misunderstanding. And it was about learning to do that, which I think we started to plant the seeds. I don't think that was fully realized.
So where do we start? As for me as a parent, for you as a parent, I think in all the work I do, I think, can I start teaching my girls how to communicate these things so that when they get married, they'll understand how to communicate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's about cultivating a home culture where we talk.
How do you do that? It's hard and it's scary, right?
It is hard and scary.
I struggle to do that.
It is hard and scary.
Oftentimes.
Or feels awkward or feels forced or whatever. But I think, I think it's just about cultivating that culture, which I think we've done decently well, that we can talk. Some of my kids don't or won't, and some of my other kids talk
I think that's,
a ton.
I wonder if that's kind of, you see this beginning part of this movie and there's not real communication.
Well, yeah, it's not even real love, right? Because it's a fantasy of what love would be.
So it's that to me is kind of symbolic of a marriage and how we struggle so much at times to share what's really going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't even understand what's really going on.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem a good part of the time.
Yeah.
I see two aspects of that. One, I don't really know. I don't have a good handle on it. Mm-hmm. I'm not self-aware enough, or I don't want to be honest with myself even.
Because it's hard, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other is, dang it, I lost the thought. My brain shut off.
Yeah. And so then, no, you're good. And so the thing is we get to.
Can I jump in? So the other is we don't know what to ask for.
Yeah.
It's like we want to feel love, but we don't know how. We're not willing to be vulnerable enough to ask for love in the way, or we don't know the way that we feel loved.
Well, and I think
so we don't know what we need. It's like we want the other person to fulfill it,
well,
but we don't even know what we want.
Connection and acceptance. That's what everyone wants.
But we don't. Right.
And so yeah, and so we don't. I think oftentimes we don't realize how that's what we want. So how do we get that? And so
the other person should just do it.
Yeah,
they should know.
Well, and that's easier. Easier to say, right? It's easier for my mind to think my wife should know that this is what I want right now. She should. Well, if she really loved me, she would do this for me right now. Instead of me saying,
which is hilarious.
Well, and here's the real thing, though. What's really going on is I don't feel like I deserve that.
Yeah.
But that's way harder to say.
Yeah.
And if I could say that instead of why didn't you do this? Why don't you do that? What's wrong with you? If I could say I feel like I'm not lovable, that's way easier to hear.
Oh, sure.
Right? That opens up connection, communication.
One of my biggest interventions, particularly when I have couples that are super high conflict, is I try to get them to lead with how they've been a horrible spouse.
So lead with what's going on with them. So you're emoting the shame, right? You're trying to get them to come out with
Right,
the
because
shame.
then it's like-
which was really kind of the primary emotion. You're trying to get. I
Yeah.
think that's what you're trying to do is
Yeah.
get them to come out with their primary emotion.
Right,
which is
because I'm
hard.
trying to get blame and defensivism out, and it's like if I lead with why I've been terrible, then and it's an articulate response, and I'm doing it, and I'm taking responsibility for it in a really genuine, honest way. Then my wife can be like, "Yeah, that is really hard," but it's like then what are you going to do? Beat me over the head more? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You do that, and it's like, yeah, like I'm sorry. You know what I mean? I just am being vulnerable here.
Sure.
And so that's what I'm trying to do. I think I'm trying to get. I try to get them out of blame and defensivism because that's the biggest killer. Like you can't. I mean, even with Gottman, he points up that's one of the four apocalyptic horsemen is defensivism, because once you go defensive, you're not listening to what's hard for the other person.
Yeah,
it's a natural
criticism.
reaction,
Yeah.
especially when you're like, no, that's not it. I didn't do that. I didn't mean it that way. That's not what I'm about. But
Defense
you're
and criticism go hand in hand,
Right,
right?
right.
And those are two of the four
Yeah.
horsemen. And so it's really, really, and I think that's what's so
that's my
interesting.
attempt to get them out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting, and that's what I think is kind of nagging about the beginning of the movie is there's not real communication going on,
Right.
But then they're showing love building, right? They're showing the building
Because it
blocks
does
of
through
love,
service
but there's
and-
no
yeah.
communication. Well, service is great. Service is great, but you're not communicating.
Right.
You're not
talking about need, you're not talking about want,
connecting
you're not talking
through.
about- yeah.
And I think service is great, and that's a piece of it. So
All right, so let's switch
That's
gears
good.
for a second.
Okay, yeah.
So let's switch gears for a second and talk about another major dynamic of the movie, which is really strange. Not strange to me, but I don't know, we can talk about. But is how much of the characters are riddled with revenge.
Yeah, so the revenge thing.
The multiple characters are driven. The Billy Crystal and wife character are driven by revenge.
Yeah.
Like they perk up and want to help
Because
Wesley
against the prince,
Right.
Yeah.
And then you've got Mandy Patinkin's character who is just trying to track down the six-fingered man. And even like Prince Humperdinck, I mean, he's full of resentment. I mean, that's why you want power, right? I don't know if it's explicitly stated. But yeah, it's interesting that the characters are so driven by revenge, and I guess it bugs me.
Well, and it's even Wesley or Dread Pirate Roberts, right? I question some of his motivation.
It's funny. It's funny. Michael and I have to make a point sometimes because we're friends and we talk all the time. And so we have to be like, no, we can't talk about this because we got to talk about it on our podcast. Like we got into a heated discussion about unconditional love and if the characters had it or not. And I'm like, we got to stop talking.
Well, and we get into like these really good discussions. And we were joking. It would be so awesome if we had someone that could just follow us around and just start recording when we start talking because we
have good conversations.
Yeah, we just talk. But I think it's really interesting because, to some degree, Wesley comes back.
You think this is your take on it?
Yeah,
is that he's coming back out of resentment? I think Wesley's coming back because he's truly in love with Princess Buttercup.
I think
and
that
he
too.
can't. And he knows what's going on, and so he's going to save her. He's going to go love her. But you had
I
suggested.
think there's love there. I think he wants her,
But he's hurt.
There's
hurt and shame.
resentment there.
Yeah,
right?
because
he's angry.
Because he thinks that she's just jumping in with another guy. Like not even. He's like, I haven't even been gone.
Yeah.
And you love somebody else. Like I thought our love was so deep, and you can betray me that easily.
Yeah, and I think that there's some resentment. Maybe revenge isn't the right word for him because it takes him a while to reveal who he is to her, and he
Which
really
is definitely
works.
a part of marriage.
Yeah.
It takes time to fully show yourself
Which
and
is
be
a
naked.
really interesting thing, right? Because he struggles because he feels hurt and betrayed.
Yes.
And she didn't do anything, which is a really interesting
That's
thing.
fantastic.
Because how is marriage?
That's marriage.
Yeah.
It's misunderstanding. Like that was
Yeah.
a big part of what I was trying to articulate before. It is just misunderstanding. That's all it is.
I articulated it for you.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Well done. I appreciate
Point,
that.
Michael.
Winner.
Okay, okay, we gotta get back. Okay, so where were we at?
yeah. Well, I was bugged. I was bugged by how revenge is handled in the
there's
movie.
a lot of revenge.
Well,
It's really
because
interesting.
I don't think acting out of revenge leads to a good place, and the movie kind of teaches you that it does.
They play on it, and I think that's a Hollywood type thing, right? But it's really interesting because Montoya or whatever, I can't think I don't know his first name in this, but the sword guy, right? That's avenging his father. He really
Inga Montoya.
Yeah, Ingo Montoya. It's interesting because there's these comments like, "Hey, you spent your whole life," like at the very, like when he almost kills the six-fingered dude. The guy makes a comment.
How
after he
pathetic.
throws the,
How
yeah,
pathetic
he's
are
like,
you?
you wasted your whole life and you weren't even successful. But that's what I kept thinking is, oh my goodness, this man has devoted his whole life to the revenge of his father.
What a waste.
Sorry, what?
Well, just like, yeah, it's like a waste.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that's crazy. And I get there's like some aspects of diligence there, right? That there's dedication, but at what cost? And I think that's what we have to talk about is how do you find the balance, right? Revenge really can take over so quickly, and it becomes everything to you,
And
right?
the thing, even though, and I've absolutely seen this therapeutically, is even if people have the opportunity or experience of fulfilling their revenge, they feel empty.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that irritates me about.
So what are they actually seeking then? Because revenge is not it.
No, right,
So
because
what do they
revenge doesn't deliver.
So what does Ego Montoya
Well,
really want?
He's not managing his loss.
Yeah.
He's not negotiating his loss in a healthy
He's
way.
alone. He's scared. I mean,
Well, he lost his dad.
physically is alone.
He
too.
lost his dad.
So
he had to watch the death of his
Yes.
father, and then the thing that killed his father left him scarred.
Yes.
Right, and so yeah, it's completely understandable that he'd be riddled with resentment and revenge. But
So really, the resentment and revenge is
how
the
about this?
secondary emotion.
how about this
ahead.
though? So it's interesting because Mandy Patinkin's character kills him,
Mm-hmm.
like he exacts revenge, but then he goes into the Dread Pirate Roberts. He still has another journey to go on to.
Sure.
Because he hasn't grieved the loss and he hasn't grown. So he's going to get the chance now to go be Dread Pirate Roberts, which is a whole nother arc of growth because he hasn't grown
Yeah.
because he's been stuck
In the
managing.
movie.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
in real life, that's not likely.
What's not likely?
Spending your whole life on revenge, there's just so much. And accomplishing the revenge. That's the thing I think that is so characteristic in therapy is so many times I have people that are stuck on I need this. I need them to hurt like I hurt.
Right.
They never
I'm not
get
saying
that.
that. No, I'm not saying
They
it's-
never get that.
I'm not saying it's good.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that Mandy Patinkin's character still has a whole nother arc of growth to go through
Okay.
because he has been stuck with the
Well-
revenge. He hasn't negotiated the loss
Well, and I think
in a
that-
healthy way.
I think that, with revenge, and I was saying there's two things with revenge that I think are important, and I can't remember now. But anyway,
So one of the things I would say, and maybe this will jog your memory, that is why indulging revenge is such a horrible idea, is that it just brings more suffering into the world. Because you know what I mean? Because you're going to go kill someone, and in the movie, the six-fingered man is a truly like evil person, so like he deserves to die anyway, let's say. But like a lot of times other people, if you exact revenge, like that's somebody's father, that's somebody's brother, like somebody's going to be hurt. Maybe you're justified, I suppose, but that's the cycle never ends, which is why like Nelson Mandela is such a brilliant guy. He's like, we have to have a day of reconciliation. Because if we're all going to continue to just punish each other for the wrongs that have been done, it doesn't ever end, which is why the Christ figure is such an important symbolic idea, because it has to go somewhere. Because if we keep just trying to exact justice on each other, then the suffering can never end. It needs to end up in one place for it to be absolved. Otherwise, if we're just going to live by the law, then you're going to pay and you're going to pay. Well, that's your fault. I blame you. You don't take responsibility, and it doesn't ever end. It's a cycle of suffering that never ends. And so I think that's the thing that like bugs me, is that they, it seems like revenge is absolving the people, but it doesn't work that way.
Well, and I think that and it doesn't because
doesn't satisfy
revenge
your
is not
loss.
the issue. The
Right,
issue
is
is
loss.
well, I think it's loneliness. It's not feeling enough.
Right.
It's feeling.
Well, that's
like,
one. But I think I mean he lost his dad.
Sure.
So I'm just saying that.
I've lost my father, and I don't feel any desire to.
Oh,
avenge.
right, sure,
You
right.
know,
But you
I
didn't
mean-
lose your father at
Well,
knife point
I mean,
in front of you.
No, I mean
By the
I mean,
six-finger
it was pretty
man.
Traumatic, but it wasn't.
I'm
that.
sure it was.
But
sure
you
it
know,
was.
and I think that I think that a lot of the times when we're looking at revenge, right? It's there's something underneath that, right?
Yeah.
There's something deeper
Sure.
to that, and I think finding out what that is a better use of time. And I think that's
Absolutely.
one place where the movie kind of falls short. Is it's like revenge. You know, I think they try, right? They try to illustrate that, you know, this was traumatic to me.
Yeah.
And so my father, I cared so much about. He was my father. You know, I loved him, and so I'm trying to avenge him. But really, you know, after you like honestly in real life,
It doesn't-
go and kill someone,
You're not gonna feel better.
Feel better.
Well, and then the thing that the fantasy is then you have to contend with the fact that you're somebody that killed somebody.
Yeah.
Which you can chew on that you're justified, but you're still going to have to deal with that. And I've worked with individuals, you know, that have been involved in that kind of thing, and it's a difficult thing to make sense of. Even if you were justified in what you did in taking the life of another person, you know, reconciling the fact that you're a person that did that is a very complicated thing to figure
and there's
out.
really no way around that. I mean, people can say, well, I could do it or not, but I mean, unless you're antisocial, there's not.
That's exactly it,
Yeah.
right? Unless you're antisocial and you don't have empathy,
Yeah.
you have to contend with the fact that somebody is no longer on this planet
Yeah.
because of what you did.
Yeah.
And that is a
to those who don't know,
hard-
we're speaking specifically of antisocial personality disorder,
Yeah.
which would be what you characterize like in the movies when they say this person's like psychotic or this person is
Sociopathic.
Sociopath. Thank you.
Yeah.
That would be antisocial personality disorder.
Yeah,
There's
which
just no
isn't most
remorse or
people.
feeling.
Yeah,
No,
because it's like
very, very
it's
uncommon.
very rare because you don't. I mean, people are just objects. They're just chairs. Like it's like if a chair is broken or something in your house is broken, you throw it out. You get rid of it. It doesn't matter.
But the revenge thing, I mean, the hard thing is it's fun, right? Because think
It
of
is fun.
all the movies with revenge.
Yeah, it's totally
and it's
huge.
exciting.
Yeah.
It's like but then underneath that, I think there's this idea of pain, this idea of loss, this idea of sadness, this idea of you know, who am I now? You know, who do I connect?
Now that
with
I've
now?
fulfilled that, like, well, yeah, like where is my purpose and meaning?
Yeah.
Where what matters? And because it's not fulfilling, because you still have to then it's like, okay, now it's realized, okay, now you got to deal with the loss of
Yeah.
your dad. You know what I mean? And the trauma of witnessing a death. I mean, that's
Yeah.
horrific. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's not realized through the exacting revenge on the thing that is traumatized you for sure. And so that's something that I had the most difficulty with in this film.
It wasn't. Now I want to just bring up. I love this. I love the Andre the Giant character and the Montoya character because it's like they're with this bad guy, right? So and you made this comment earlier, I think last night or something. You said, well, they were for hire, but I love how they're like honorable.
Yeah, they're good. They're good.
They're like, oh, that doesn't seem like the right thing to do. Or Andre the Giant says a couple of times, like, that doesn't seem very nice, or that doesn't seem like the
He's this
honorable
gentle
thing to
giant.
do.
Yeah,
And I
like,
just
"That's not good."
I love that idea of of what they show with how how there's these two good guys that are trying to pose. And it's interesting because sometimes, and I'm not saying, if we do this, we're bad, but, or we're a bad guy that deserves to die. But I think oftentimes we hide, our insecurities behind this, like, this wall of we know. I see it a lot in relationships, right? Where one of them will kind of just act like they know the answer when they don't.
Right.
And they're hiding kind of behind that insecurity of and to see them calling him out on it so frequently is such a cool thing to me.
It is really
because
fun.
how often do people actually do that? Like when you're in a conversation with someone, they're just acting like they know everything, but you, in your mind, you're like, well, I actually, like, especially with mental health, because people ask me what I do. I'm like, oh, I'm a social worker, because I am. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And so people, and most people don't know what a social worker is. They think I go in and take kids out of homes or whatever.
Yeah. That's a wonderful job.
Yeah.
You really want to feel good about yourself.
And so I
hard.
Oh yeah. Child welfare is definitely a tough one, and I've done some work in that area.
Goodness
but
gracious.
it's a tough one.
So what's interesting about these two characters too is that they were a part of the initial kidnapping, but then they're helping Wesley reclaim. So they're redeeming themselves, right, by getting behind Wesley and saving her.
Yeah,
it's really interesting too that Wesley and Mandy Patinkin's character suffer a great deal before Mandy Patinkin gets stabbed 6 times or whatever, and before he can exact his revenge.
Well, yeah, he's dying, right? He's been stabbed. He's been had a knife thrown into his stomach.
Yeah,
and then he kills him, and then he goes on to do all these other things.
He's running around. He's good.
Wesley's nearly dead or whatever.
Yeah, mostly dead.
Mostly dead.
Yeah.
And then
he's faking it, right?
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that he plays on Humperdinck's shame.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. I liked that they didn't kill Humperdinck, and that he was left with the worst thing you can be left with as a man.
Which is really interesting.
Which is your shame and pathetic.
Yeah, that's his punishment, right?
His punishment.
But that's the punishment we all give ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't do that?
Right.
It's such a...
So he's left with that. That's what he's defined by.
Yeah.
That's what will be known by forever.
So then why did Inconceivable die? What is his name in the movie? The genius dude.
Oh, it starts with a...
it's something weird. I can't remember. With a V or a U or something like that.
Vizini?
Vizini?
Vizzini.
Yeah, Vizini.
Vizini.
Maybe. I don't know.
They must not say it. They must not say it much.
Andre says it a couple of times, but he's got that thick kind of accent.
That weird.
It's hard to
understand what he's saying.
Understand, but it's interesting. I don't know why I keep going back to this, but why does he die? He dies, but then no one else
he
dies.
was really murderous. I mean, I think one of the reasons why is because
wasn't
kind
the prince also? I mean, the prince
right,
tried to kill.
but they're leaving him with the greatest punishment you can have, which is to live with your shame. He just needed to die.
So why didn't the other dude get the greatest punishment?
Well, because he was too egocentric to know that he would deny. He's so narcissistic that he wouldn't even know that he had shame.
Yeah, that's a
right.
good point.
So he needed to die.
Point.
He couldn't even sit with his shame because
really
Socrates and Plato are idiots.
And it's this really interesting concept of personality disorders, right? And what is underneath that? And we know with narcissism, oftentimes it's really just fear of
it's shame,
inadequacy.
Yeah, it's deep shame, but shame that can't ever. I mean, narcissists are incapable of embracing and acknowledging their shame.
Yeah,
I mean, they're just deeply over. They're constantly affirming the opposite,
which is interesting
at all costs, and in the most selfish, self-serving
so in a way.
way.
You look at that, and it's kind of it's a sad thing because they're in so much pain.
Oh gosh,
that their only option or answer is to act like they're better.
Yes, to make up a story.
Yeah.
Well, and they have to continue, and it's such a delusion, right?
Yeah.
It's a delusional story,
and it's
and they have to constantly affirm that story.
To hide from what they feel
they can't. They're not enough.
Which is such a sad thing. It's really that's what makes it so hard to work. Yeah, when you're working with narcissists.
Well, any access too.
Any personality disorder. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Sorry, not access to anymore.
Yeah,
My bad.
Yeah, come on, John. Come on.
Just we'll talk about this.
DSM-5.
That's right. We'll revisit this in another show we're gonna do.
Yes.
There's no more access to. So. I mean, that's such an effective way. The 5 axes.
Yes.
Particularly axis 5, where you just come up. You're like
gaff.
You're like 62. Well, I'm feeling a little bit more 89, don't you think?
So for whoever doesn't know, DSM-4,
don't waste your time.
TR, there was a 5 axes, and
the GAF score.
So the GAF score was the 5th, which is a global assessment of functioning. So it's a number, 0 to 100.
But there wasn't an assessment test, or maybe there was.
There's kind of
there's a guide. Yeah, there's a breakdown,
and you kind of just pick a number.
And every 10, every factor of 10, it was more disorganized.
And DSM-3 was before my time. I don't know if DSM-3 had a GAF score.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I don't know if the DSM-3 had 5 axes.
I don't know. I believe there was axes. I don't know how many there were though.
Yeah, but
that's
they surrendered the accesses with the DSM-5.
I will say this. Watching Princess Bride, I didn't watch it a ton growing up. I mean, I watched it my fair share. But I do enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
Each time I watch it.
Yeah.
So even though I probably
the
feel like I'm not
characters are
as
warm.
diehard as
Yeah.
some people I know.
I'm not
but
diehard,
I
but
enjoyed
it's a very enjoyable story because there's the idea of true love,
and revenge and
well, my favorite scene is Dread Pirate Roberts coming up the rope, and he's like, "Hey, man, like, you gonna get up here? Are we gonna do this or whatever?" And he's like, I'm a little busy down here. He's like, "I love
help.
You can help." And then there's the whole like, "Well, you're waiting to kill me, so I'm not gonna trust you." And they make
that was another point where I
That's, like,
felt
really
some
cool.
emotion when
He's like, "I swear on the
Montoya or whatever." Yeah, says, "I swear on my father."
And the guy's like, "Okay, I believe you."
Yeah, that was pretty.
And
cool
I think
moment.
but I think it's also that's the development of the trust that then leads Dread Pirate like, "I'm not going to kill you," and he hits him over the head with a rock.
Which is really cool because in the end, like you were saying, right? It's, hey, you'd be a cool pirate.
Yeah,
right.
You've got another journey to go on as well.
So
that was by far that moment as a kid was my favorite moment. Like, I always felt like the movie dragged after that. Like, I loved all the point up to Vizizi being killed and then them going down the hill and then into the... But from the bog on as a kid, like, I lost interest. I loved the first act. I guess I loved the first act, but the second act dragged for me, and I struggled to want to... Like, I like to watch the opening, but then I'd, like, leave and go do something else because it's like I saw all the parts I liked.
Well, I like... I think that was really interesting, the point you're making with marriage and how that might be symbolic.
I think it is. They're tumbling down.
I didn't even maybe... I didn't connect that, so that was cool.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the movie, and my favorite part still is my daughter shooting up on the couch and saying... He-Man! I was proud.
But true love was realized. Humperdinck gets to live in his shame, and we
were all entertained.
We've got a new Dread Pirate Roberts on the way,
and I'm up 1 point.
You're the winner.
Yes,
I surrender. You can hit me over the head with a rock now.
Yes,
or I could wrestle you, flip you over, and pin you in your unconsciousness. So. Be careful when you sleep tonight.
I will. I'll be very careful. That should be our teaser.
It'll be interesting. I think
laying on top of me.
That's not the kind of shows we make.
I'll try not to giggle. I'll try to act dead.
All right, folks.
Yeah,
I think
great.
that's The Princess Bride.
Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, appreciate you. Like, comment, share. Send us some questions.
Yeah, we love questions.
We're doing our Q&A series. I don't know if you're listening to this and you haven't checked out the Q&A.
And fun questions, too. So definitely mental health questions. We'll do our best. We have all the answers.
Yes.
Every answer you could possibly need, we have.
Clearly.
But more importantly, the fun questions. So
give us some fun questions.
That's fun.
Fun. We're going to do with the Q&A. We're going to try to keep them like 10 minutes-ish. We're going to have a fun question and then like a therapeutic question.
Yeah.
So send them our way.
Thanks all.
All right, people.
Adios.
Yep.